Fantastic. Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm just going to start with a tiny intro that puts my work into context. Up further, like that. Great. I live in or operate in a number of different worlds. My husband and I run a film company. We make TV commercials. We also do a lot of work for aid agencies, so spend a lot of our year in developing countries. And I also contract as a consultant on gender-specific projects like female genital mutilation, HIV/AIDS in developing countries, and here with Africans in New Zealand. So it's through this humanitarian side of our work that my love for photography and also my journey as a photographer really began. Photography gives me a voice for what I see and do. It also provides a way for me to be able to tell stories of the things that we see, capture the lives of the people that we're with, and probably on a personal level it provides a bridge for me for the various worlds that I live in. My style or approach to photography is pretty simple. I love what I do. I love the people that I work with, and basically through spending a lot of time with them, I just shoot what I see. So I've got 20 photos to show you, and the first half is of the prison work, and then the second half is on orphans. Great. If that's okay for noise? Great. This is one of my first photographic projects. This photo was taken in Papua New Guinea. Kevin and I spent 12 weeks in 15 countries meeting with inmates. Out of it, we made a film for an American-based prison organisation and a photography book called Freedom. And John Turner helped us edit it. One of the things I hoped to achieve with the book was basically to de-demonise prisoners. Society often sees prisoners in terms of their crime, a murderer, a rapist, and I wanted the more human side of inmates to be known, that every inmate is someone's son or someone's father, someone's mum, someone's sister. This is one of my favourite photos. This was taken in West Africa. We were in a big prison with about 2,500 inmates, and we went to the middle of the prison, a male prison, and through a tiny door, and we found this compound with about 300 women living in the prison. You can see the men looking through the window. A couple of years ago, we were in Benin, and we went to probably one of the most inhumane prisons we've ever been to. About 2,000 men living in a small city jail built for 200 people. And there were two images that remain with me. This one of a guy in shackles. And this man here who was dying of AIDS, possibly TB, starvation. A couple of hundred people crammed in the cell, and we found him just lying on the floor. This picture, this compound is the same one as the earlier photo that I showed you, but 15 years on, we came back to this prison, and what was pretty sobering was to think of what we'd done, what had happened in the last 15 years, and yet we found the same inmates in the prison, same people, basically nothing had changed at all. This was in Manila. We were in a city jail in Manila, and the prison warden proudly took us down a little corridor, and we turned up in the cell, 72 children in the cell, many just in there for petty crimes. And the prison guard said to us, this is what we call a pedophile's paradise. It's one of my favourite photos. This is in Bolivia, in the notorious San Pedro prison. Some of you may have read Marching Powder, one of the largest drug manufacturing prisons in South America. I love that this guy doesn't look like a notorious drug lord. He looks like someone's granddad. And then the liberty or freedom written on the prison wall. We spend a lot of time filming children in prison. A lot of children end up in prison with their parents, particularly in South America, because whole families are sentenced for drug crimes. The same little 8-year-old boy. The safety of children, as you can imagine, is pretty precarious in prison. But this particular prison we've been to, there'd been a little girl that had been raped and killed 2 weeks before we arrived. But the option to live in the favelas or the slums, particularly again in South America, is also really unsafe. I love filming some of the work that the different charities do. In this particular place, a group of people has got together and set up a private school for rich African students, and then with the profits, they brought prisoners' kids into the school. So this is one of the prisoners' kids. love filming orphans, so we've moved out of prison into orphanages now. This little girl, every orphan's got their own story, a rich and usually tragic story. This little girl was abandoned at birth by her 14-year-old mother, who was a commercial sex worker. When I took this photo, she wanted my Kate Sylvester glasses and told me that if I gave them to her, she could read the Bible. Another one of my favourite shots, beautiful little sister Mira, who's 7, a lovely Muslim Ethiopian girl. And her eyes, which I found both beautiful and haunting all at once. And wherever I stood or moved, I felt like her eyes were still looking at me. Big problem with orphans is teenage orphans. Lots of teenage orphans, particularly in East Africa, end up as commercial sex workers just to survive. This was a home of about 8 girls that all lived in this one little room. That's the only source of light that came into the room. I think it's washed it out a little bit, but you can see in the original all the bunks that they all slept on and shared. This is a project we did on HIV/AIDS called Circle of Friends in Malawi, and we found a group of about 10 kids that were all impacted by AIDS. These 2 kids, Chimwewe and Pempero was dying of AIDS, and both their parents had died, and they lived with their grandmother. They were just getting ready for bed this night. I was just with them. They had no blankets and one mat that the 3 of them slept on. This is Evelyn, who was in her late 60s and cared for about 1,600 orphans and vulnerable children. She was a dag. This was taken about a week ago. I was in Ethiopia with a group of donors. We were looking at urban slums and 5 million orphans in Ethiopia alone. And this was on the weekend, and the kids had no clothes, so they wore their school uniforms on the weekend. This is another teenage girl living with AIDS, had been brought up by her grandmother, and we went to interview her and her grandmother had died a few days before. I asked her if she had a photo, and she just turned up standing like that, very similar eyes, which I thought was beautiful. One of the things I love about shooting in Africa is all the textures, the walls, the mud walls, the colours, that often usually just one source of light, and also just the resilience in the kid's face. End on a happy shot. This again was taken a few weeks ago. Group of orphans, all of the girls had been abandoned, 2 of the girls living with HIV/AIDS, and yet again just the resilience and the joy in the kids in the face of obviously extremely traumatic lives. Thank you.